Set Out with
Dave
and Mackie live from the Sydney studios in Australia. Jump into the chat room at freedomslips.com while we're on the air. You can listen from there if you like. And follow us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. Check out ChineseHideout.net for our show archives, notes, and links we paste into the chat during the show. Excuse me. With so many ways to listen to us, and Dave, of course, it is difficult not to listen to us. If you live in Kentucky, you can listen to us on FM WZZR 101.3. You can get an app, Revolution Radio, TalkStream Live, TuneIn.com, Radio Tuner, Speaker.com, iHeart, Live 365, and yes, that's right, Shiny Side Out. Shiny Side Out app. Go and get it. At home, of course, on a Grace tabletop digital radio or driving around in a GM motor vehicle with the receiver-enabled radio. They are all revolutions in radio. Now, what you can do at the moment, you can buy a CD of your favorite host for the 2013 season. Each CD costs $30, and you can check out the info on the station's website. The number to call in if you're in the United States of America is 347-688-2902, or, which is easier, via Skype, simply at Freedom Screen. One word, Freedom Screen. Solaris had once again a great show. Again, thank you very much for warming everybody up. And Dave, how are you today, sir?
Hello, everyone.
You're out in the field, aren't you, sir?
I am, and I'm sorry there's a lot of background sound. I hope it's not too bad.
No, you're coming through nice and clear. Thank you.
Awesome, loud and clear. Perfect. Do you know what, everyone? I'm actually at a protest march, and this protest march is to protest something that's, it's deep in the hearts of every single person that lives in Australia.
That's true.
We're all affected by what has been determined to be the worst budget ever handed down by any government in Australia's history. It affects every single living person in Australia except for the wealthy. The wealthy are unaffected by it, and this is the shame. The shame is that it affects healthcare, education, indigenous populations. It includes the purchase of military aircraft, which are duds. It keeps going. I swear to you, I've been tweeting all day. Have a look at the tweets for Shiny Side Out, and you'll see all the pictures. I'm so upset. It befriends large mining conglomerates who want to make the largest mines ever seen. I think, what was the picture, Mackie? Was it 5 or 7 times Sydney Harbour's size, open-cut mine?
It's a massive hole in the ground. And once again, in Australia, it is not nationalised, so these are all privately owned mines, which pay usually some kind of royalties, and there was meant to be the super profits tax, which didn't work, unfortunately.
And do you know what that actually did, Mackie? The super profits tax for the mining companies, all that did was reduce their quantity that they exported.
Yep.
So they could stay underneath the threshold.
So they only had an enormous profit, not a super profit.
Exactly. So, look, do you know what? I'm here. It's a huge protest. The police lowballed it, I believe, at 8,000 people.
So Dave, where exactly are you? Are you in Sydney?
At the moment,
yep.
Yeah, we're in Sydney, where the protest march, I think we're all now congregated in Victoria Park, and it's on the corner of King Street and Broadway in Sydney. The entryway to Newtown.
Okay.
All right. Now, it's a fun-loving thing. There's been no violence. People have their families, children. I can see hula hoops around me. There's every single person in our community is represented here today. The support that we got when we walked the, I think, near 2-kilometre walk it was, from the community, even four-wheel drives, nice cars, people from all levels. I'm surrounded, there's uni students, there's healthcare workers, there's education and health straight away. There's people in wheelchairs. There's everybody is here.
So we can say they're not the radicalized fringe, just in case newscasts in the future will say that, right?
Absolutely. This is not fringe stuff. We're talking everyone's affected by it. Look, for everyone out there that doesn't understand what has happened is the government has trumped up and artificially manufactured a budget crisis, they say, even though from what I saw, my research led me to believe we're between third and fourth in the OECD for debt versus GDP, which doesn't sound like a crisis to me. We're trending towards a crisis, and all of the commissioned report from his best friend said that, well, this is the Prime Minister's commission report, said that what we were leading towards, if we didn't do anything, was a terrible debt, and we need to rein it in. So they dusted off every one of their old policies they've ever wanted to do, and they've launched it at us all at one time. And it's such a disappointment because everything that we've done in the past, has led to us having the life we have now. Like, it's not great, but I think we got out of the GFC pretty much unscathed. Pretty much. Yeah, interest rates are nice and low, but the banks changed their profit margin from 1.4% to 4%, as we all know. So ultra low, historically low Reserve Bank prices. Yeah, it's not that at the pump, if you know what I'm saying. So they want to increase the fuel excise. Yeah. The costs on fuel is going to go up as well. If you're unemployed, you won't be able to get benefits for 6 months after you become unemployed.
Just for our American listeners, at the moment we're paying about $1.80, $1.70 per liter, not per gallon, but per liter of fuel. Okay,
per liter, exactly.
And the dollar, the $2, Aussie and the US dollar aren't that far from each other, so it gives you a bit of an idea as to how much we actually pay here.
We pay a lot, and you know what? I actually look at how much I put in my car. I don't fill my car up because driving around with a full tank is a waste of fuel. Because you're like in a plane, you use more fuel to move more fuel.
Yeah. Well,
so I run from half down to save money, and I've proven that over a longer period of time. So I can't afford to keep filling my car up, at $90 a tank or $120 a tank, and think about what that's going to do. So what the government's also doing is saying, well, you know what, you're going to have to pay $7 when you go to a doctor. Now, you in the US, you understand that it sounds like we're whinging, but we're not. We had free medical, Everyone deserves the right to go to hospital or go to your doctor for free. Just imagine that, US citizens. Good luck with that. Right? But over here, no, we've had that, and now they're going to reverse it back out again. Why? Well, it's the wrong plan. Every one of the targeted government's options that they had to fix what they said was a bad budget still included spending. Now, let's put a scenario down real quick. Imagine if you've got a credit card that is going off the balance sheet, What do? You don't start charging your friends to look at the bill and then keep spending. You quit spending and try and get it under control. Whereas this government seems to be continuing spending and charging us at the same time. And for useless items like 58 of those F-35 planes, which are a complete dud compared to the X-32. We should have bought those. Anyway, I don't think we should be buying any of it. I think we should raise the Medicare levy by 0.5% and use case-based medical care. That will sort out our medical system, and that will sort it out throughout the baby boomers ballooning of medical care, which is coming up in about 2 or 3 years. What I'm going to say is, look, I'm here, and there's a lot of impassioned people here, and I'm actually standing with Brian, and Brian has a lovely top on, and his top says, no gas, renewables now. And we're all on the green front. I'm green. I want there to be renewables. I want there to be, energy coming from thin air, the free energy. I want alien technology. That'd be awesome. But you know what? Let's have wind power. Let's have solar power. Let's have geothermic power. All the powers. Let's try and do that. Let's not. Let's talk to Brian. And Brian, why are you here today?
Well, personally, I'm here today to oppose coal seam gas developments. We're part of a committee that's been opposing them for several years now, beginning a few years back when they proposed to drill in St. Peter's in the heart of a city of 5 million people. We stopped that, but we're all continuing to support it, opposing it throughout the country, the state, and all over the place. So that's why I'm here. But really, there's people here today from every different walk of life because this government has managed to offend everybody, no matter whether they're old or young, children, anyone interested in the environment. They have slashed billions from health when we have probably the best health system in the world. So they've cut something like $20 billion out of it. We've had a fairly good education system. They've cut billions out of that. As Dave said, they're going to spend a lot of those billions of dollars on some new fighter jets. Now, those particular fighter jets, I've looked up the research. They're lemons. Even the US Air Force experts are saying they are not ready for combat. They're just not ready. They're total lemons.
That's why they want to sell them to us, right?
And we should be doing the same.
That's right. So Brian, that's right. So just on the fighter jets on its own, the RAND Corporation, now we spoke about this, right? The RAND Corporation themselves, I think it was 3 years ago, put out a paper because they were being offered to us then. The planes themselves are too heavy. They do, though, however, do faster than speed of sound. But they do have vertical takeoff and landing. But the competitive jet was much better in all regards. Now, I'm going to say that the F-35, by the RAND Corporation's opinion, is not capable of competing against the current jets that the Russians have. They're just not able to. So the MiGs that the Russians have are far superior. This plane is incapable of out-turning, out-climbing, and flying further distance. Even the payload is smaller than which is, remember, it's a combat platform. It's even smaller than the X-32 because it has a vertical lift fan midway along the fuselage, right? And so that actually restricts the amount of stuff that can be, taken on board. I'm going to put Brian. Brian's got some last words. Hang on a second.
Yeah, but the overall, every walk of life has been offended by the Abbott and Hockey budget, but there's a pattern where they've cut back anything to do with environmental stuff. And until recently, until a couple of years ago, Australia actually had the world record for the most efficient solar panels developed here at University of New South Wales in Sydney.
That's right.
No longer, that's been overtaken. The professor who did that is now working overseas. This government has shut down anything vaguely to do with climate change, environmental policy, renewable energies. Our own treasurer, Mr. Hockey, said that he found wind farms offensive.
That's right. And claimed they cost $500,000 a year each for maintenance, which is a lie.
So it's going to be very interesting at the G20 summit to see, now that President Obama of the US says that renewable energy is their number one priority, how they're going to work in cooperation with our Prime Minister who's decided that it's irrelevant and disruptable.
Oh, look, that's such a good point. I did the research during the week and I found that the wind turbines only cost between 1% and 2% of the original purchase price as maintenance per year. They do not cost $500,000 each. He said that they were, what was it on the landscape?
They were a blight on the landscape.
A blight on the landscape, but he said, unfortunately, because they're contractually obligated to maintain them for a while longer before he wants to get rid of them.
Now, I mean, compared to other countries, Germany makes more solar power than Australia does. Now, they only get the sun about 3 days a year, and they still make more solar power than we do. And Australia actually led the way in solar power research until recently. Spain has solar-powered power stations contributing, I think it's like 30% of their national production.
Exactly.
It's really
Australia is
crazy.
lagging behind in very technology that would most benefit us.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, look at how much sun we produce, right? I mean, literally most of our country is desert where the sun shines all the time.
Yeah, exactly. Now, thanks very much, Brian. That's an absolute pleasure talking with you today. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Brian. Dave, tell me, what's the mood like out there with you? How many people do you think? You said 8,000 people are there?
Well, no. I estimate more. I think the police, to be honest, lowballed it. From what I can see, it looks around about 10,000. Now, believe it or not, I used to work for a union, and my crowd estimates were pretty close to what the experts were saying. So, it took ages, I swear, for that 2Ks, and the whole 2Ks were people. So, like I said, check out the photos. The mood is great. People are dancing, and, these people are happy people. They're happy that they're here and we're reunited together and to show solidarity against this budget. This budget is such a bad thing. It's you know what? I'm going to use their words back. It's a blight. It shouldn't exist. And any government, and I've been arguing with people all week on, in social media. One of the things is why. Oh, that's right. There was a newspaper article that came out this week. I think it was from News Corp, and it said that it was an English Polly who was found to be trumping up figures in support of increasing disabled fees. So if you're disabled, there was fees related to you and your medical care. So what he did, he falsified figures so he could say that it was, more people were using it, but we can't afford it, so let's put the fees up. So he got that passed, and someone decided to have a look to see what on earth he was talking about, and none of the figures were real. That fellow has now been pushed out of Parliament. I mean, that's the system at work, right?
Yeah. Someone
lies, they're caught out, instead of going, well, that was a funny thing you got caught out on. Yes, wasn't it? Oh, I'm smoking a cigar. No, it shouldn't be like that. We should be protecting truth and honour, and we should, believe it or not, actually respect politicians. But in a poll that I was witness to, politician was the bottom of the trust group of 6 different things that people held dear to them. Friends were the most trustworthy over relatives. It went to doctors, and then I don't know which one was next, to be honest, but the next 2 after that were really poignant. Used car salesman and then politician. Politician being the least trustworthy profession ever.
But we know this is true. I mean, the thing is every politician that wants to be elected will promise you the world. Always has. And the same thing happened with Tony Abbott. He promised this, promised that. No new taxes, no attack on healthcare. We won't cut the ABC's funding, which is the public broadcaster here in Australia. No educational, no health, no elderly or pension cuts, no veteran cuts. And guess what? They're all getting cut.
That's right. Cut. What is there anything else on the list? Cut it. Yeah, so you're right, Mickey. And, the numbers might seem small in compared to the US. Remember, we have just less than 1/10 of the population of the US.
Yeah.
And to say that they're going to withhold $80 billion from health and education, which is actually setting, for some reason, they're setting the healthcare system free of the federal system. How that's supposed to work, I don't know.
But
because they've been paying for it for 40 years.
Yeah, but realize this, while we are only a very small fraction of the American population, we are the 17th largest economy in the world. 17th.
Yes.
Right, so we punch way above our weight class when it comes to economic performance. And like you said earlier in your intro, you're absolutely 100% correct that if you talk to people from overseas, and I listened to a lot of radio this week, so this is not just me talking, there's a lot of commentators on this. Yeah. Everybody says, what are you talking about, crisis? Your economy is doing fine. Sure enough, in the long term, yes, we will have some issues, but nothing compared to the issues that America or Europe will suffer, specifically around the age gap that is happening in their workforce, superannuation or pension funds and things like that. So we are actually in pretty good shape. Sure, we shouldn't have the debt that we do, and we have to do something about it. I just wonder if there wasn't a more sensible way to approach it, and certainly I'm not entirely sure why we would buy jet fighters in that quantity in the first place, and then secondly why we would buy these Lemon jet fighters, which do cost billions, so that's a little odd.
Yeah, they claimed that the money was already there, and what's funny is it wasn't.
Yeah, but even if it was there, couldn't you divert it?
In fact, I wouldn't have signed a brand new contract to purchase them, and then continue on this plunge, the destiny that we're all in trouble, the whole world's going to end because we can't our budget's so terrible, right? But I mean, that's not the case at all. So one of the arguments that I've been posing with my friends in social is that, well, in a financial crisis, the government becomes the only employer. During the recession, a lot of capital work started, and because all the other businesses have to collapse. They can't, if they're not getting any money, they can't employ people. So everyone becomes unemployed. The only person that can is the government. Yeah, that's what they're supposed to do.
Yep.
What if they don't do that? Well, everybody dies. So they become the responsibility, and it all sits on their shoulders. Now, what happened during the GFC? I think to be honest, I think the government did the right thing. I think the debt we're in is okay. I think it's manageable, fourth in the OECD for GDP. So why is that such a crisis? Well, it isn't. But why would our treasurer put, I forget the actual figure now, please, don't quote me on it, but I will be quoted clearly. It was a couple of $100 billion. They transferred onto the Federal Reserve. Do you remember that, Mekki? I think it was the second week.
Yeah, I think that's correct.
Yeah. So in an unprecedented move, it would never happened before. And yet they said, look, we need to do this. We have to shore it up. Shore it up from what? All that did was put money off the budget. We don't have money anymore to do anything with. So we had a budget crisis. Well, the budget crisis isn't real. None of the way they approached any of these faults that they listed as being faults are right. So where is this money going to come from is the question that everyone's asking here today. Where is it going to come from? How is the health system? How is the education system? How is indigenous affairs? $500 million been taken away from them.
Yeah, but
and after 200 years of occupation, they're still... that's what.
No, I agree with you. It's true.
Of the country, they had it for 70,000 years,
yeah.
And we've been here for 200, and they still live terribly.
Look, there's a massive disconnect. Okay, if you take these monies away from these programs, and let's not forget there was a cut to foreign aid as well. I think 20 billion, or it was a ridiculous number.
I saw 7.5.
Yeah, look, again, I don't want to make up numbers, but it was billions of dollars that were being cut from foreign aid, of course, leaving the most vulnerable. And the impact here is not dollar for dollar. The impact here is much greater because we're talking about providing medical life-saving care, fresh water and clean water and so forth to numerous, in fact, innumerable communities across the globe. But so there's this disconnect here, I think, between the politicians that have made this budget or have come up with it and the people in Australia. So you have to understand that a lot of the, in fact, Joe Hockey and Tony Abbott are hailing from the northern suburbs of Sydney, or the North Shore. Specifically Joe Hockey. It was actually I think he's the North Sydney electorate. Anyway, be that as it may, I've seen him a number of times. He's got friends with Ferraris. He's a very large, very well-dressed man. If his suit costs $1, it costs $5,000. So he's not poor. And these people have a massive disconnect as to what it really means to be a battler. In Australia, we pride ourselves to be connected to the people, on the ground, the battlers, the rovers, the people that actually built this country. And he said, this surcharge when you have to go to see a doctor of $7, that's really just a cigarette and a beer. Well, I tell you, my mother doesn't smoke and she also doesn't drink beer. So the $7, she's not going to save by not drinking that beer. Okay, so it's really a disconnect because not everybody drinks beer and not everybody smokes. These are really unfortunate throwaway comments he makes. He was also seen dancing in his office and smoking Cubans. And I can tell you, in America you probably can't buy them. In Australia you can, but Cubans cost. Real Cubans, and if they're good, and I'm sure they would have smoked good ones, cost several $100s. So after the budget was released,
right.
So there's a disconnect between these people who actually I don't think ever have worked in their life. They might have always been party functionaries, and now that they are at the top echelon of power, they don't ever have to work again. they are now set for life. Even if there were, if there was a double dissolution tomorrow, or no confidence vote, or whatever it might have been, and they are ousted for life, they will have a pension that runs into hundreds of thousands of dollars in benefits, so pension and benefits bundled in a car, free travel, all kinds.
There's also forever payments.
Forever, forever until they pass from this terrible place. But
it used to include free flights every year.
Yep.
As well.
Yep. So this is where we're at, guys. So you have to understand that the people that have made this budget for the most part, or have pushed through the salient points, because obviously it's bureaucrats that do most of the work, but there was a theme to it. Those people are disconnected from the Australian public at large.
Oh, in fact, indeed, they're so disconnected that they think it's fine to do all of these things, that we'll just suck it up and it's good to go. But they smile on the inside because those budget cuts where they're no longer going to the states and the states provide health and education, the states then have to pick up that bill. Now, in Australia, we're not doing great in state-wise. Each state, even some areas, are either bankrupt, are in the red, or getting towards that.
Yeah.
And the people who are going to be footing the bill are eventually us again.
We should maybe explain.
We're paying the government, and they're diverting those funds to something else, and now we've got to pay for it all over again, but state funding somehow.
Yeah, I think we should explain.
So if you do the math, Neki, do the math and realise how much it is per person that we have to pay each now again to our state to be able to make these things happen. So $80 billion divided by, was it 23 million?
Yep.
It's big numbers.
Yeah, no, it is. It's 4,000, 40,000. Anyway, but actually it is a lot of money. But having said that, in fact, 40,000 per person. That's a lot of money. Now, but having said that,
they don't have the money.
We should maybe explain to our overseas listeners that our states in Australia don't really have the right to tax. There's no state-based taxation except for the GST, which is the goods and services tax, the VAT, or the value-added tax that you might know. It's running at 10% in Australia. So all taxes here, or all direct taxes, are federal taxes. Okay, so the states have some indirect taxes, but income tax and so forth.
And surcharges.
Yeah, but all the like income tax and so forth, they're all levied at a federal level. Okay, so it is really what's really happening is that the federal government seems to be pushing the states, and this is not my opinion, this is the opinion of some analysts, to raise the GST from 10% to 12 or 15%, which is actually significant because it's an indirect tax. So everything you buy, you now have to pay 12 or 15% more for.
So what they're doing is forcing the hand of the states to request the increase because it's divided unfairly at the federal level and handed back to the states again. It's collected federally and then handed back in random quantities depending on what the requirement is.
Yep.
So I saw an interview with our Prime Minister when it was suggested by the interviewer that in fact he doesn't need to do any of that. He could do it himself, and he smiled.
Mm-hmm.
He smiled. He took a breath in, and determined, what a fantastic idea. I could just do it myself. So I'm disappointed, as are everybody that are here. Now, it's been said that when you're at a protest, one person at a protest is equal to 1,000 who don't attend. So we're looking at a large number. There's a lot of people here. A lot of people are affected. I know people that work in health that say they're going to have to close our hospital. They won't be able to run it. Now, the way that we're funded for hospitals in this country is that the money is pushed from the federal government to the state, and the state then can do whatever it wants. This argument was raised in the previous government, and they actually took over the control of one Tasmanian hospital. Unfortunately, they've just let them all go. They let them all go. The funding's been dwindling. Healthcare waiting queues go up and up. Private health insurance was pushed as the alternative for Medicare, this free health centre, free health, and that was because they wanted to sort of be a little America. That's the way John Howard saw it. Now, the guys that are in believe that big business is the way to fix everything. You fix big business, everyone becomes employed, and everyone's super happy, right?
And we know that it's actually a fascist misconception.
Yes, it is. And who's been slashing jobs everywhere? How many jobs have been slashed totally and been estimated to be slashed by each of these large companies, these multinational companies? At the moment, I believe it's more than 400,000 jobs already since they've taken term last year.
Now, let's put this in perspective, and I think we've spoken about this before, Dave. If we keep going the way we are, because these jobs are not just they don't disappear necessarily. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But for the most part, most of these jobs are actually moved elsewhere. Usually to a country which has very lax labor laws, doesn't pay their workers very much. There's no protection for the workers, blah blah blah. Right? So essentially, to a place which is more beneficial to the corporations. That's why they're multinationals. That's why a lot of the Australian mining companies and other companies have moved their headquarters to Singapore and Southeast Asia in general because the tax laws are better. But that's neither here nor there. So but the problem is that if you make those jobs let's say redundant, you disappear them from Australia, you then have a knock-on effect. These jobs that you've offshored will now affect people like greengrocers and coffee shop owners and laundry or laundromat owners and so forth and so on.
That's right.
And what you are creating is a massive wave of underemployment, right? So you no longer can make enough money. Now, the funny thing is that a lot of the companies that are offshoring their work, services companies, like call centers, were the first to go. The odd thing is that people that would consume those services from those companies are the people that live in the country, like in America, Australia, or Europe, or whatever. But we're eroding the economic base for those services to exist. So
Exactly.
let's say, if you've moved the call center, which is fine, by the way, right? You can do that because that's usually transient work and students and so forth, and that's fine. But you're moving manufacturing now. You're moving, production facilities away as well. You've now debased your economy. What do I mean by that? You have now taken wealth out of the economy that would have been spent on goods and services that you've offshored. So my question really is this: who will buy these goods and services that are being manufactured overseas? Because in country, like in Australia and America, and in America we can see it a lot. In fact, the poverty is reaching alarming heights. In Europe as well, though, who will buy these services? There'd be nobody left to buy them.
Because no one will have money to purchase them.
Yeah, that's
right.
That's the crux of it, and we're not there yet, guys. Make no mistake. But eventually we will get there.
That's right. The added bonus to that, and of course it's a negative bonus, but the added bonus is that there's a balance sheet, of which way money is going into or out of your country. It's a balance sheet. It's called a trade balance. And if money that people earn in this country are being sent overseas, then your country loses value. So there has to be money coming in. You have to be able to export stuff, so money is coming into your country to fix the trade balance. And it's all added up. Even the money you take overseas or you bring into the country is added up to total. That's why you have a declaration form when you go in and out of the country with a large sum of money. So it's so disturbing that our let's call it a fledgling economy, post-GFC economy, whose retail sales are still struggling. The big retailers are still reporting this financial year negative growth. One was sold. I think it was DJ's. They're not recovering. Yeah, internet sales has a certain component because you want a bargain. People don't have the money to splash around, or regardless of their, they're having more care about how they spend their money. They're holding it closer to them. They're buying what they think is more appropriate. They don't have as much flash money to get rid of. The big push to get people into homes for home ownership meant that now we've got this huge loss in available money to be able to spend on just useless items. That's really, taken a big dive.
Yep.
So home loan mortgages are low in value, in repayment, in interest. The repayments are high. the value of the properties was very high when most of us got into them. My hand's up. I know yours is too, Mackie. Yep. So imagine what would happen if the economy, which is what they're touting, starts to make it an upturn for some reason, which is impossible, right? Because no one's going to have any money to spend. It'll all, the last few cents will be vacuumed out of all of our pockets. The money we would have spent on a small gift, that packet of chips. I'm thinking, grandparents gifting their grandchildren. That money will go. If you have a sick child, it will cost you a fortune.
Oh, yeah.
If you have someone, even the benefits for having a disabled child, where you have benefit support, or you have a child going to school, which I have, I've got two, that money has now been wiped. You don't get any of that support. That support was put in by the Labor government, the previous one, in an attempt to restrict the limitations that people had to access education, so that every single person that went to school was suited up, had their books, had their pens, their shoes, had their hats. As you know, if you have to buy school kids' shoes, they go through at least 2 or 3 a year because their feet grow. They barely wear them out. You're going to buy this stuff all the time. And in fact, that was being assisted by the previous government. And in our country, if you go stand outside for 10 minutes, you get sunburnt. And so the previous government gave money to all the schools to put roofed areas for their play areas, forced everyone to wear hats. That's true. Sunscreen's compulsory on hot days. Well, during the summer years, summer months. So all of these things, the back-to-school bonus, let's get another pencil case, all of this stuff, yeah, that's all been stripped away. It's gone now. Well, it will be gone if it gets passed. What we're hearing, Mackie, for at least, on a plus side, is that even the Liberal Party, their own party members are going to cross the floor on it.
Yeah, I know.
The opposition to them won't let it go. The Greens won't let it pass. And if they make a change and they try again and it fails, what happens? Double disillusion, right?
Absolutely, and
we go to the voting box again.
So it means, yeah, we have to look for a new government essentially, not meaning that we're going to get a better one though.
Well, I think what this might do, and I would hope that it does, is make people listen and make people finally understand that if they're going to lie, they're going to get caught out. If they're going to promise one thing, and this is what I was saying on social, right? If they lie and they're caught out, why can't they be abolished? Why can't the entire party be penalised by saying, no, okay, you guys forfeit, the other guys are automatically in, like a game of sport of some kind. The ref comes out, blows his whistle. Sorry, you're in breach of contract with the Australian party or the Australian people. That's it. You null and void. Go. Walk out now.
Yep.
Right? Why can't that be in place?
Yeah. Look, I read
because that make them honest. We would trust them. In fact, how about this one? This is one of my friends raised this one. Murray, if you're listening, and I know you are because he's a fan. I caught up with him this week. I found out he lived in my street when I was growing up, like 10 doors down. We never hung out. It's crazy, right? Guess what? He posed something fantastic. We've got the internet. Not all of us have fast internet, thanks to the new government. They stopped the NBN. Damn you, I hate you. It's a tech revulsion. Now, guess what? Imagine if there was zero allowance by the media to cover it, by the parties to receive donations, and by the policies to be shown as anonymous policy A and anonymous policy B. The policy items were listed, and you only voted based on what you wanted to occur. Each party would put forward their policy, and you had to vote based on only what they recommended. No people spoke. It's only written or in Braille. And I said, wow. I can't imagine a world where people actually voted rather than the populist vote. Who cares, right? It could be a council that drives it for all I care behind that Have a team of people. Who wants a leader? I don't need a leader. How about a responsible group of people that can work it? What about it being just policy-driven? Screw this money. They're not there for a living. They're there to rule the country, and they're meant to be our representatives. If they don't do what we want, why are they there?
You know, you're talking about an ideal form of government, and this has been proposed for as long as we had governments. And no, it's true. In fact, that's part of the Hermetic legacy, and it's part of the Gnostic knowledge and secret knowledge, in fact, that has been handed down from secret brotherhood and secret sisterhood throughout the ages. And for the most part, the idea is that you should be a philosopher king or a philosopher priest. So you should have wisdom, not just knowledge, but wisdom to apply it. And ideally, you should have no interest in power. that would qualify you eminently to be actually in power. And you should be incorruptible by power, which would make you a very rare individual indeed. But nonetheless, so the ideal form of government was comprised of these solar, if you will, philosopher kings and their advisors and priest caste and so forth. In fact, Plato himself stipulated that. He actually tried it on an island in the Mediterranean, not with much success, unfortunately. But having said it, look, it's a fair point. I mean, we have to ask ourselves this: what kind of government do we want? And the very truth is, at the simple heart of it, we always have the government we deserve. Okay, guys, we always have the government we deserve. I know it's harsh, but
that is pretty harsh, man.
But the answer is not liberal or Labour or Democrat or Republican or whatever else is out there. Yep. It's if you want something else, guess what? You have to do something else. Because you have the right. I mean, not every country you can do this in. In some countries, you have to actually have a revolution, like an armed conflict, to achieve this. Mm-hmm. In our countries, for the most part, we do have the opportunity to, albeit it's very difficult. Don't get me wrong, right? It's not easy. And maybe if you do pose a serious threat, like Pauline Hanson did it once. I'm not saying I'm agreeing with everything she said, but I'm saying that she was upsetting the status quo, and they did whatever they could to shoot her down. That's maybe the fate that you would have to share with her if you were establishing a party or movement that could oppose the big players. And I think the Westminster system is flawed anyway. Whenever you got two opposing sides, it turns into schoolyard behavior.
It is. That's what it is.
I don't know. I'm one of those sad guys that listens to the ABC broadcast of Parliament, right? And it's sad. It is sad.
I'll tell you, the people who live their dream are the backbenchers.
Yeah, that's right.
The backbenchers who post from their constituents requests. They're the people who, in my regard, are actually doing real politics. The rest of them, I don't like to be apolitical. I'll just say that I don't think the system is supporting what I see as being the right way to govern a country. What I see is the system supports corruption, as we're seeing being brought out by these royal commissions. And ICAC, which is a movement, guys, a commission against corruption. It's meant to be independent. And it's finding out that these parties, like in the US, were being supported by slush funds to anonymize contributions and make them large numbers of contributions. They're illegal, but they were pushing them through to the party. Now, none of these things are right, and they're being found out. Maybe there's a ticking time bomb sitting underneath the Liberal Party, and it's only a matter of time, and they've gone, we're going to bat big, we're going to go big on this one, and we're going to put it all out there. No one will like it. What the hell?
Yeah.
I don't know. I can only imagine, because the only other alternative is they're so damned arrogant that they think they're going to get away with it.
But they will. If nothing else has been very clear, that
you tell us, Kumbi.
No, but it's true though. I mean, people get away with this all the time. I mean, what's the worst that we've seen happen? I mean, it was this Eddie Abid affair, right? Blatant corruption and blatant bribery. If worst case scenario, and I mean worst case scenario, a couple months in a Gulf estate under house arrest, okay? But no, because I mean these are guys that steal well, in this case, in Australia's case, millions or tens of millions, but in other countries it's billions of dollars to enrich themselves, and there is no repercussion. There are no consequences to these crimes. It's white collar crime. In fact, it's politicians' white collar crime. I can't remember the last time. In fact, I can't remember any time that a politician in Australia has served a prison sentence for any wrongdoing, and this is including union officials that use the parliamentary credit card for very dubious activities.
Well, they were in a court, and then they were seen. They were announced publicly. So, without putting the person's name out there, yes, one of the guys, the union leaders, used his credit card for hiring ladies of the night.
Yes.
It's. I would have to say you'd have to be particularly under-intelligent to perform any act like that if in the first place, let alone then say no in Parliament that I didn't do it and then be found guilty of it.
Yeah.
So it's not beneath them to be corrupt. I think it's just that schoolboy mentality thing that they can get away with it. It doesn't really matter. It's like a hacker in his bedroom hacking NASA. Yeah? It's only occurring in his bedroom.
Yeah.
It's not occurring anywhere else. It's only occurring on my credit card, or it's only occurring, at my party. It doesn't really matter. But no, these are things that affect every single person. It's the governance of our country. If a CEO of any business, much smaller than our country, was to behave in any of these manners, the board would sack the CEO.
No, that's right. In fact, if you ran your business, if you were a small business owner, or in fact, if you conducted yourself in public with your peer group, your neighbors in the same fashion as they do, the politicians do in Parliament and amongst each other and so forth, you would be jailed. You would no longer be amongst us. But there's, something called parliamentary privilege, where they are not exempt from prosecution, but it's very, very difficult to get them in front of a court and front of a judge.
Yeah, that's right. So Mackie, look, it's been a great time here. It was a beautifully safe time. No, from what I understand, 0 injuries, no heart attacks, no heat stroke. Everyone was well behaved. The crowd had a lot of fun. And I think Sarah McLeod sang. We had speakers from all walks of a different party. So there was the Greens. We had one of the New South Wales opposition people. There was a union leader from the Australian Services Union. There was a lot of people speaking. There was an Indigenous Affairs fellow as well. All of them had tremendous points. All of them were affected by this budget, and all of us united to show the numbers that are, like I said, 1 to 1,000 that are being affected by this. Now, I hope that everyone out there gets the message, certainly in Australia, and I love for this to be. Imagine, Mickey, if this was shared. If this was shared on Facebook, on Going Social in Australia, yeah?
Yep.
We know. We live it. We're affected by it, and we know you are too. So please share it and get on with it. Mickey, I'm going to have to leave you guys. And I want you to have a tremendous show. I'll only do it to the top of the hour, and if you could fill in for the rest of the...
No, absolutely.
Awesome.
And thank you, Dave, for bringing us a live report from the protest march in Sydney in response to the budget that was posted this week. So you heard it here live and first, maybe. What happened? There was no great unrest. There was no radicalized fringe. Whatever you might hear in other newscasts, Dave was there.
Crowd.
That's right. And he's brought it to us. And then thank you also for bringing us the interview with Brian. Is that correct?
Brian, it was, yes. Awesome guy. And he knows our station now, and in fact, all the people I've spoken to today, and there's been at least maybe 100 people, they've all opened their eyes towards not only our country's plight, but how the rest of the world is being affected by exactly the same things.
Oh, look, it's endemic across the planet. I mean, we've spoken about this as well. I mean, it seems as though some game plan was being stepped up. We spoke about our hypothesis around 2020. You can look up that show either on our website or on YouTube.
Absolutely.
And it's the show. It's show number 100 and number 101. Called The Hypothesis. You can listen to it and disagree with us to your heart's content, unless, of course, you know, especially if you've got a separate or different hypothesis or theory. You know, we'd be very much interested in hearing that. But look, Dave, I really appreciate you bringing us this live cast. It's the first time we've done this, guys. That's really good. We are both also working on bringing you the video from Devil's Rock. I've posted some of the photos because I couldn't post the video on on Lost Origins. That's a Facebook group, Lost Origins, and those are the experts that were with us. So, guys, if you want to see the pictures of the Aboriginal rock carvings, they are now posted, or some of them are posted at Lost Origin. Haven't been able to post the video because there's a 1 gig video or file limit that you can post up to Facebook. Apparently, I didn't know that, but now I do.
Oh, right. So there are applications. I'll help you. I'll assist you with those, Mickey, once we join our work together, okay? So I'm also putting an edit together of the stuff that I've got, and we'll put that together on Facebook. Sorry, on YouTube.
Absolutely.
All right?
Absolutely.
So thank you, everyone, for hearing me through this, and I just hope the audio quality was okay for today's broadcast.
There was a little bit of interference, the chat room said, but I don't think anything terribly bad. I mean, we'll be able to hear the recording on YouTube. Hopefully a Nighthawk is making one, because obviously we can't make one today. Dave is not in his studio, and I don't have the facility to do that. But nonetheless, thank you, Dave. And guys, don't go away, because after the break, I will continue or finish off the show we had regarding the Bermuda Triangle. I want to talk to you guys about the other mysterious places that we have found on the net, around the world, in fact. There's a list posted, which is really interesting. And just to let you know, going forward, we're preparing a show cycle on fiat currency and fractional reserve lending. We're going to try to explain to you what it actually means, and also maybe even make you a little angry, because we're all being taken for a ride. Dave, I think that's probably the best way to put it.
Oh, yes, indeed. And I'm going to get an update from the IMF on CDSs for that show as well.
Okay, cool.
Which is credit default swaps, okay? And where Greece stands.
Yes, Greece. Well, that's. I think Greece is a test case, to be honest. It's my opinion, but you know,
exactly.
We'll see what happens. Apparently, White Rabbit has just informed me that there is an application. That's called Handbrake, and that's free, and that will compress the video easily. So thank you, White Rabbit. Much appreciated. So we
that's
might
the interactive nature of our show, isn't it, Mickey?
It is. Oh, look, absolutely. And look, while Dave is in Sydney at the protest, I'm sitting in my study, and we're chatting to people all over the world in the chat room. Please do join the chat room. It's you can get there via freedomslips.com. So it's the Revolution Radio site, and anyone is welcome. We don't like a diatribe, and we don't like people, trolling or swearing and whatnot. But certainly everybody can take part in a lively discussion. And again, the chat room is pretty packed today, and we're having a bit of a lively discussion, which is not really topic related, but it's certainly interesting nonetheless. So we are reaching the top of the hour, or the bottom, I should say, in American terms. So as soon as the music comes, don't go away though. And Dave, you will be signing off. And once again, thank you very much for sharing your insights. Are people now going home, or?
Yeah, so the crowd's now begun to disperse, but there's a lot of families that have decided to, there's probably about still 100 people dancing. We've got those bins with the speakers in them, and if you might have heard some music in the background, I apologize, but there is there's dancing, and there's people doing handstands, and there's families, and it's turned into a huge picnic out in the evening. There's still protest signs up, and a lot of people handing out leaflets and everything, but the crowd is dispersed probably to about 1/5 of its original size by this stage. And like I said, it was a family-friendly event, and there was no violence or anything, and I'm just proud to have been here on this day. This is one of those days in history that I really knew that I had to be part of it.
Oh, look, and thank you for bringing it to us. You know, and I don't know how interesting it is to our American listeners, but I think it should be, because what we're seeing here in a mini version is a test case once again, guys. You've got your budgetary difficulties, and they will get more difficult as you go along. Australia is a small country population-wise, so these tests can be run here. And make no mistake, it is a test, and that might very well be expanded globally, just like Greece was a test case for attacking people's personal savings.
Yeah, absolutely. And they did that in no, it wasn't Syria, it was Cyprus as well.
Yep.
So just imagine for a moment, if you will, how. Yeah, I'm being distracted. Just imagine for a minute, if you will, how all of the nations around the world, who were all completely diverse, they had diverse policies, diverse policing models, they had all of these things that were completely different from each other, are now being equalized. I'm seeing it. Other people are seeing it. The comments are out there on social. Check it out. If you see that and recognize it for what it is, you know, it could be another one of those stepping stones towards a single world government, world policing. You know, I think that's the scary thing. So each time they make these changes, think about the path they're taking us to. Are we all going to meet in the middle? I think so.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this is Dave from Sydney signing off from Shiny Side Out. Meki will take the show for the rest of the hour. Enjoy it, everyone. Take care.
Thank you, Dave, and be safe on the way home.
I will.
All right. Okay, I think Dave is going to leave us any moment now. He's actually going to dial out. Stay with us, and he's gone. So stay with us. After the station break, we will come back, continuing and finishing off, in fact, the show where we started last week, which was talking about the Bermuda Triangle. We will share with you, or I will share with you, because Dave won't be here. I will share with you other mysterious places around the world. And I will start the conversation, if I have some time at the end of that, around fiat currency, because there's going to be a show cycle around this. I think it's very important that we actually start talking about what really underlies our reality, right? And fiat currency and fractional. Shiny Side Out with Dave, who's not with us at the moment, and Meki. We are halfway through show number 116, 610 and 100 if you count like me. And we were talking about, I guess, the budget in Australia, because it's quite topical at the moment. And Dave came to us live from the protest march in Sydney, where he also managed to interview one of the protesters. And rightfully so. It's certainly very topical to talk about this kind of thing at the moment, but even more topical is the fact that this is a listener-funded station, and we do encourage you to donate any money that you can, because Nighthawk and the crew, I think provide fantastic programming, and all of the hosts here, including Dave and myself, do this voluntarily. We do not get paid. Nighthawk does not have any corporate sponsorships or any real commercials, except for station commercials. And I think that's well worth supporting. So if you feel the same way, please do donate what you can. The donate button is on the homepage. It's also in the chat, if you have a look there, and it's in fact on the left-hand side in the middle of the screen. So it'd be great if you could. We really appreciate it. As I mentioned before the break, we're going to talk, or we're going to finish off talking about the Bermuda Triangle show. We started last week in show number 115. We had discussed the Bermuda Triangle at some length. I guess the genesis of its name, its first appearance in popular culture, as well as some of the more famous cases associated with the triangle. It can be argued that it was debunked or not, as your belief system may be, but that's really beside the point. It is certainly something that captured my imagination when I was very young, and it set me off on my life's course, which is to, investigate and be interested in the paranormal. This is a very broad term, and that's pretty much everything that is considered fringe by mainstream society. And for me, certainly, this first step was the book Bermuda Triangle by Charles Berlitz, which I got when I was about 8 or 9 years old, and I devoured that book and any subsequent publications by that particular author. And then I read Däniken, and from there on, and you can imagine what happened. But there are some mysterious cases around the triangle, and in Flight 19 that we discussed at length with you was probably the most mysterious, especially because not only did the 5 Avenger bombers disappear, but also a mariner that was sent out to look for it disappeared in the search. And at the time, when it happened, in 1945, it occasioned the largest sea search and rescue that had existed at the time. So this was the single largest search and rescue effort that had been launched up to that point. Since then, of course, especially with the disappearance of the Malaysian airline, it has been surpassed quite significantly. Okay, now I did want to share with you, though, some of the other mysterious places that exist around the world, because it is not just the Bermuda Triangle that is mysterious, and it's not just the other places we discussed with you, like the national park disappearances, which are very, very strange and seem to happen in clusters. We spent half a show on that as well, and I do urge you to look into it yourself. It's very, very strange, especially if you do live in the United States and you intend to go camping in one of your beautiful national parks. Be aware that there are clusters of disappearance in those parks, and the park authorities do their best not to have this publicized. So really do have a look and be forewarned. Right, now this list that I'm going to share with you was actually published by Michael Alba back in 2013, and I found and I thought this is a brilliant compilation of mysterious places around the world, which are in nature similar to the Bermuda Triangle. Not exactly the same, but certainly they can capture our imagination. So without further ado, I give you Superstition Mountain. Okay, the Superstition Mountains are a mountain range that are located east of Phoenix, Arizona. Okay, and of course it's a fabulous name, Superstition Mountains, for any mystery to start. Apparently, in the 1800s, a man named Jacob Waltz discovered a huge gold mine in those mountains, and since then, it has been dubbed the Lost Dutchman's Gold Mine. You might be familiar with that term, the Lost Dutchman's Gold Mine. Waltz was German, but I guess German, Dutch, because German in German is actually Deutsch, right? So it could be the Lost Deutschman's Gold Mine, okay, rather than Dutchman's. It's just a matter of pronunciation. Anyway, now he kept the location a secret until he died, and then he may or may not have told a single person the secret, and it depends on what version of the story you actually believe in. And nonetheless, the mine has never been found, and that's in spite of many expeditions having been sent out to look for it. There's some superstitious stories around the fact that some people that lost their lives looking for the mine are now haunting and guarding that gold in the mountains. Apparently, a Native American legend goes as follows. The treasures of the mountains are guarded by creatures called the Tuatums, and loosely translated that means the little people, that live below the mountains in caves and tunnels. Some Apaches believe that the entrance to hell is located in those mountains, the Superstition Mountains. Now, you can take that any which way you want. What is interesting, though, is the reference to the little people that are meant to live below the mountains in caves and tunnels. This goes hand in hand with a number of other folkloric tales and lore that we've brought to you from around the world. And seemingly every country, every region in the world has its attendant little people. And usually they live hobbit fashion underground in tunnels, hiding from us, the rather larger versions, which, probably hunted them at some point if they truly exist. So it's just interesting that there's a reference to something we've encountered in the past. And Dave would say at this point, yes, Mackie, that is very interesting. The next thing, the next mysterious place I want to share with you is not so much a place as it is an area. Now, most of the places we've discussed and will discuss actually are on Earth, right? There is some geographical place on Earth. This one is not. It's called the South Atlantic anomaly. Make no mistake, though, it is not in the South Atlantic. It's actually in space. Okay? The South Atlantic anomaly is the area where the band of radiation known as the Earth's inner Van Allen belt comes closest to the Earth's surface. Okay, you know there's a radiation layer that protects the Earth, the Van Allen belt. Look it up; it's very interesting. Now it's an area that is centered just a bit off the central coast of Brazil, so hence the South Atlantic anomaly, and it's responsible for a number of problems with satellites and spacecraft, from messing up the programs down to actually shutting down all of their functions. The Hubble telescope itself turned off from taking observations when passing through the anomaly. Okay, so the Hubble telescope stopped making observations or transmitting them to us while it passed through that anomaly, that area in space. And the International Space Station actually avoids scheduling spacewalks when it is passing through this area. Okay, and apparently that happens about 5 times a day. So that's how often the space station gets through that area. I mean, it's obviously in a geosync orbit. And now apparently it's not just a technical problem, but you could argue there's some psychological problems associated, because some astronauts have reportedly seen shooting stars in their visual field as they pass through that area. Okay, now again, we don't really understand or know what is going on. We know the radiation is very high. We do know that, and but up to this point, scientists have had no good explanation as to what is actually causing this disturbance or anomaly. Having said that, though, and I just want to expand this a little, this anomaly it's a real thing. Okay, we know it affects a spacecraft and space stations. And astronauts do see strange things as they pass through it. So let's extend this to the strange places on planet Earth itself, right? Why is it so impossible to believe that, while we can readily accept a strange area in space, we have a really hard time accepting that similar strange areas could exist on planet Earth itself? Maybe because it's more immediate and the effect would be I guess closer to home, which it would be, of course. But just bear this in mind. So could not an anomaly like this exist? Something of whatever might be happening in space in the general vicinity of the Bermuda trapezoid, and it's not really a triangle. We discussed this last week as well as more of a trapezoid. It is not really that far-fetched, because we know the South Atlantic anomaly is a real thing. It's not being disputed by anyone, and science can't explain what is happening, except, of course, for pointing their finger to high levels of radiation, which is, fair enough. And yet we don't know what the effects of this particular radiation are. Just something to think about, guys. Okay. The next one is on Earth. In fact, the others, all the following ones will be. And this is Lake Anjikuni. It is Lake Anjikuni. And this is a very interesting one. And normally, when you talk about disappearances, you talk about maybe individuals, you might talk about ships or planes, but in this particular instance, we're talking about the disappearance of an entire village. Apparently, this happened in November 1930, and there was a trapper, a gentleman who goes out in the wild and traps animals and then sells their pelts and so forth. And back in the 1930s, I'm sure there was still a raging trade. Now, his name was Joe LaBelle, and he was looking for shelter for the night. Now, LaBelle was obviously familiar with the area, and the Inuit village, Eskimos, that was there. And apparently that population in that village was somewhere between 30 to 2,000, and it depends on which version of the story you hear. But so the disappearance either affected 30 or 2,000 or somewhere in between people. Now, he made his way to the village, and he was a bit taken aback. The villagers were gone. It's a bit reminiscent of Roanoke, and we'll discuss that as well. It's actually a very good book written about Roanoke. Now everything though was still there, and that included food and rifles and other provisions and you know, the homesteads. It all was very much untouched. And again, this is actually reminiscent of the Marie Celeste, that very famous ship that kept disappearing in the Atlantic. So you know, what would have caused this? We don't really know. And now what happened though was that Lebel telegraphed the RCMP, and an investigation began. That's the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. So this happened in Canada, up in the northern, you know, close to the Arctic Circle. And the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, the Mounties, began an investigation. In the village's burial ground, in a cemetery, it was discovered that at least one grave had been opened, and apparently not by an animal, so it must have been done, you know, fairly neatly, and emptied. And further, about 300 feet, that's about 120, 130 meters from the village, so not very far at all, really. The bodies of some 7 sled dogs, potentially huskies, I'm not sure, were found, and apparently they had starved to death. And that is in spite of open stores of food existing in the village. Other versions of the story talk about strange lights above the lake at around the time of the disappearances. Now, we don't really know what happened, obviously. You know, I mean, aliens, ghosts, and some stories even talk about vampires. And if you guys are familiar with 30 Days of Darkness, this story actually inspired 30 Days of Night, I think it was called. 30 Days of Night, so yeah, sorry, the movie 30 Days of Night and the preceding comic book was actually inspired by the Lake Anjikuni story. Now, the Royal, or the Mounties' own website disregards the story as an urban legend. However, there are so many versions of the story floating about, and now it's been immortalized in I guess, a version of a movie. It is very hard to be certain as to know exactly what happened, especially because we know that another village disappeared in the past. That was the colony of Roanoke in America as well. The next place we discussed last week a little bit. We spoke about the sister area, or brother area, if you will, of the Bermuda Triangle, but this time in the Pacific Ocean. It is called the Devil's Sea, or the Dragon's Triangle, so you can, you know, whatever you like best. And it is very similar to the Bermuda Triangle in that it is host to a number of mysterious disappearances and unexplained occurrences. It is just located off the coast of Japan, and apparently there are magnetic anomalies, inexplicable lights and objects, and, as I said, mysterious disappearances. And now this is different, though, to the Bermuda Triangle, which the Coast Guard and the Geographical Society in the States don't actually acknowledge. In this case, the Japanese fishing authorities do consider this area a dangerous area, officially. Okay, and now there's one story, and that in 1952, the Japanese government sent out a research vessel, and that was the Kayu Maru. Maru actually means ship in Japanese, if I'm not mistaken. The Kayu Maru number 5, to investigate the mysteries of the area. Obviously, the Kayu Maru number 5 and its crew of 31 were never seen again. Mysteriously disappeared. There's another story which talks about Kublai Khan, which significantly predates the Kayu Maru number 5. Sorry, and it talks about Kublai Khan's disastrous attempt to invade Japan by crossing the Devil's Sea. And according to the story, he lost about 40,000 men in the process. Okay, now let's remember the Japanese fishing authorities actually have designated this area as dangerous. Now, of course, there are the usual theories, aliens, gates to parallel universes, and so forth. It could even be volcanic activity. The Kayamaru number 5 could have been caught in an eruption. But again, we don't know. We simply have not enough information to come to a conclusion. And unfortunately, the Kayamaru, which was meant to investigate it, disappeared as well. And maybe that has discouraged any future scientists wanting to investigate the phenomenon. The next mysterious place we've discussed at length with you. We, in fact, didn't quite devote a whole show to it. We did devote a show to the phenomenon which we call the Skinwalker phenomenon. And this is the Bigelow Ranch. This is the Skinwalker Ranch. There was a movie. There was a book, a very interesting book, which was then subsequently made into a docu-movie, which I recommend highly. Very, very interesting. It's a 400-acre property in northwest Utah, which is home, and we've discussed this, countless UFO sightings, very, very strange animal mutilations, and even more bizarre occurrences. We spoke about the bull that was in a shed into which he could not have gone unless he was somehow spirited through the walls, because there wasn't an opening big enough for him to go through, or, of course, unless the shed had been built around the bull, which was very unlikely. Now, these mysterious happenings have been documented since the 1950s. Even though some of the most bizarre stories happened to a pair of ranchers named Terry and Gwen Sherman after they bought the ranch in 1994. And that is really the basis for the book, Skinwalker Ranch, and the subsequent movie. Apparently, the first day they moved to the property, they saw a large wolf out in the pasture. Now, again, they actually didn't say wolf, they said a large dark or black dog. In fact, this large black dog or even large wolf phenomenon we've spoken about at length in the past as well. It usually goes hand in hand with the Yeti or Sasquatch or Bigfoot phenomenon, as well as potentially interdimensional portals and UFO sightings. It's all very, very strange. So that's why cryptozoology sort of infringes upon the UFO territory. They even went to pet the wolf because it seemed tame. It was docile with the Shermans, but apparently ended up grabbing a calf by the snout through the bars of its enclosure, so it was not entirely tame. When Terry, one of the farmers, shot the wolf with a pistol, the bullets had no effect. It finally left after Terry brought out the shotgun, though even that did not do any actual damage that they could see. The Shermans tried tracking the wolf, but its tracks stopped abruptly as though it had vanished. And again, this is not the first time we've come across this. It's the disappearance of the large cats as well as the large dogs or large canine creatures into thin air. Now, this is not where it ended. The Shermans were constantly plagued by UFO sightings, intelligent floating orbs. Okay, so now, and these orbs are accused of having incinerated 3 of their dogs. Inexplicable cryptids. Now, cryptids are as unknown creatures, or creatures that are not known to our common variety zoology. That's a cryptid, like the goat sucker, if you will, or even werewolves and the monster of Loch Ness. All of these creatures are cryptids. We had a show of this in the past. And some very gruesome but very specific cattle mutilations. And now, it apparently got so bad that the Shermans sold their ranch to Robert Bigelow in 1996, the founder of the National Institute for Discovery Science, who wanted to study the mysteries surrounding the ranch. Now, Bigelow owns the ranch to this day, and NIDS keeps a tight lid on the findings. We've shared some of the findings with you on this show, and for the most part, it seems to point to an agency, to a force, if you will, that is operating of its own volition. So if you study a phenomenon, usually in science, it doesn't study you back. The Skinwalker Ranch seems to break that mold by studying you right back and reacting to whatever studies you are undertaking. making it, of course, impossible to conduct empirical scientific research. You need to find a different approach. So it's almost as though the quantum level intruded upon the macro level. Because on a quantum level, if you observe an experiment, you will influence the outcome of that experiment. So on our macro level in the Bigelow range, it seems that if you're observing something, you are inadvertently altering the outcome, and you have the experiment studying and reacting right back at you. Fascinating stuff. And again, I will revisit this with Dave in a future show. I want to see if anything new has popped up there, and we will try to get Mr. Bigelow, if at all possible, on the show to talk to us. In fact, if anybody in Revolution Radio or Freedom Slips knows Mr. Bigelow and could get us in touch with him, that would be awesome, and I really appreciate the introduction there, guys. The next one is a very famous one, and most of you will know it. It's Point Pleasant. I will say once again, this has been the basis for a movie, in this case even with Richard Gere, believe it or not, and it's around the Mothman prophecies, that's right. Now, the most famous, and there were a number of different events there, but the most famous of the events involved the creature known as Mothman, who is alleged to have terrorized this small West Virginia community from November 1966 to December 1967. Now, apparently over 100 citizens of Point Pleasant have eyewitnessed or have seen this creature firsthand, and it was described as a 7-foot-tall, broad-chested man with hypnotic, glowing red eyes and wings that stretched 10 feet long and dragged behind that creature on the ground. As I said, the Mothman, was the subject of a book and a movie, and in fact has its own statue in Point Pleasant. Has many potential explanations. Some believe this creature to be an extraterrestrial, others a mutant or cryptid. Again, none of these are mutually exclusive in my mind. And some suggest that the people of Point Pleasant were actually scared by a large owl or a sandhill crane. I think you have to be naive to believe that. If people that live this closely in their own environment can't tell an owl from a 7-foot man, you know you have an issue. Okay, I don't care which way you flip. Now, be that as it may, the Mothman sightings stopped after the Silver Bridge collapsed on December 15, 1967. That event killed 46 people, and a lot of people, and in fact that was the gist of the movie as well, believed that those two events are connected. So this is not actually the first time something like this has occurred at the point of tragedy. Usually there are stories associated with warning or some kind of supernatural insight as to what was about to occur. So as I said, there's now a theory that the Mothman may have been trying to warn people potentially of the bridge collapse. Now, in addition to Mothman, there are several other paranormal tales from Point Pleasant, and they include UFO sighting as well as reports of so-called Men in Black. And we've discussed Men in Black at length. We've given you the various popular theories as well as our own thoughts on the Men in Black. But apparently, and those men were looking for information, especially in Point Pleasant, around the paranormal, and then usually tell people to shut up about it. Okay, so that's an interesting little side twist, which of course gives some credence to the UFO connection potentially. The next place is in fact Lake Michigan, and it is called the Michigan Triangle. Not very original, but there it is. It is the site of mysterious disappearances both of land and sea craft, and there are quite a few. A couple here I want to share with you. Captain Donner. On April 28, 1937, Captain George R. Donner of the O.M. McFarland was on his way from Erie in Pennsylvania to Port Washington, Wisconsin, on Lake Michigan, and he had to pass through the triangle. Now, apparently he was exhausted and retired to his cabin, and he left the second mate in charge, and told them to wake him when they got closer to their destination. About 3 hours later, the second mate went to wake him up, but Donner was not in his cabin. He was also not in the galley. He was searched for exhaustively on board the ship. I mean, the ship was, turned upside down, but he was never found. So he disappeared out of his cabin while crossing through the Michigan Triangle. The next one is Flight 2501. On June 23, 1950, Northwest Airlines Flight 2501 was on its way from New York to Minneapolis, and the pilot at the helm was Robert C. Lind, and quite experienced, and he was carrying 58 passengers. There was bad weather, and so when the flight was near Chicago, it changed course and had to turn over Lake Michigan. About midnight, Lind requested permission to drop altitude from 3,500 feet to 2,500 feet, but he never gave a reason as to why he wanted to do that. His request was denied, and that was the last communication Flight 2501 ever had. Now, it is alleged that its last known position was within the Michigan Triangle. Now, there are varying sources, and in fact they also have varying accounts as to the amount of wreckage that has been found of Flight 2501. Some say nothing, others say seat cushions and so forth. But it seems clear that the plane crashed into the water. However, the question is why? Because the plane was in very good condition, and also under the leadership or the guidance of a very experienced pilot. Now, despite searches still being conducted annually, and I don't know if this is still the case today, neither the body of the plane nor complete human remains have ever been recovered. And you do know, I mean, this is a bit gruesome, but bodies will eventually float ashore. And Lake Michigan is I guess, has enough people bordering its shore for these bodies to be eventually discovered. But apparently, no such luck. The next area of interest is the San Luis Valley in southern Colorado. Again, it is UFO sightings that people have here, as well as hundreds of unexplained farm animal mutilations. Now, apparently the UFO sightings are so common that a woman named Judy Messeline has even set up a UFO watchtower on her property, which has witnessed over 50 sightings since 2000 alone. And some of those sightings have been observed by dozens of people at a time. I know the skeptics will now say, mass hallucinations, there's swamp gas in your drinking water. Sure there is. Now, for the UFO skeptics out there, what is much more interesting are the tales of animal mutilations from that particular region. And now they started in 1967 with a horse that was called Snippy. Snippy was found one morning with her brain missing and her neck bones completely cleaned. Now, just a quick word on the cattle mutilations. And this, if you're a novice to this particular topic, let me say this. We're not talking about animals that have been savaged by wild beasts. That is not what we mean by animal mutilations. That is not what the UFO community means by animal mutilations. When we talk about animal mutilations in connection with UFO sightings and the paranormal, we're talking about animals that have been surgically dissected, that had their bones cleaned, for instance, certain organs removed, in most cases reproductive organs, but with surgical precision. Okay, they have not been ripped apart, right? They have been mutilated in a very methodical and clinical manner. Now, apparently, since Snippy, hundreds, if not thousands, of animal mutilations have been observed in that area, and they have several things in common. And this is, in fact, in common with other mutilations as well. There's never a trace of blood around the animal. Never a trace of blood around the animal. And secondly, The animals are all damaged with precise cuts. Like I said, not the work of predators. Finally, all of the mutilations, excuse me, happen overnight to otherwise healthy creatures. And this is something else that's important, right? I mean, these are not just animals that drop dead. So, one would have to say this. These animals would have to be stunned, tranquilized, I would imagine, or, somehow held in stasis. Then maybe transported somewhere where the actual mutilation occurs, because there is no blood. And then, once everything is said and done, they're I guess, put back wherever they were taken from. And, of course, in organs and blood and so forth, being with whomever has perpetrated those mutilations. Now, apparently, investigations into these incidents have not come up with any results, any theories, or any hard facts, but they continue up until this day. And some farmers report seeing strange lights, in the sky before they find the dead animal. Now, again, this is the UFO connection. So, in fact, it is now. There's a term that's being used to describe this creature or creatures. They're called the phantom surgeons of the plains. The phantom surgeons of the plains. It has gone into local folklore. Again, this is just one of many places in the world where these mutilations take place. And again, always very much in the same pattern. The next one, again, and I really have to wonder about people's imagination here. The Bennington Triangle. The Bennington Triangle. This is in southwestern Vermont. And it's the site of a string of 5 mysterious disappearances between 1945 and 1950. And this is what happened. There's Mitty Rivers. She was 75 years old. And leading out... Oh, sorry, not she. Mitty was a guy. My bad. And he was leading a group of hunters on November 12, 1945. On the way back, he got ahead of his group and was never seen again. Only a single rifle shell found in the stream was recovered as evidence. So we do know that maybe whatever took him, or whatever he encountered, he seems to have shot at. That's Mitty Rivers. Paula Weldon, and she was an 18-year-old sophomore at Bennington College, and she was out hiking on December 1, 1946. Again, she never returned, and no trace was ever found. And exactly 3 years later, on December 1, 1949, a veteran named James E. Tedford was taking a bus back to his home at the Bennington Soldiers' Home, returning from a visit with relatives. And witnesses saw him on the bus, the stop before before the Soldiers' Home. But when the bus arrived at the destination, he was nowhere to be seen, and his luggage was still on the bus. So again, just like the guy on the ship, he seems to have disappeared in transit, which brings to mind, in fact, the story of the guy from Tauret, who landed in Japan and he had a passport from a country that did not exist, and then subsequently disappeared from the hotel room where the police had locked him in. So maybe Mr. Tedford is now somewhere in the world where the United States of America doesn't exist, and he's having a hard time of it. This one is a little sadder. They're all sad, but this is an 8-year-old involved here, Paul Jepson, and he disappeared October 12, 1950, while his mother was busy feeding the pigs. Now, despite having a highly visible red jacket, none of the research parties formed were able to find the boy. The last disappearance was a woman named Frida Langer, October 28, 1950. And again, she was hiking, and this time with a cousin on Glastonbury Mountain, when she slipped in a stream. She decided to go back quickly and change her clothes. Now, and of course, she was never seen again. Now, oddly enough, though, she's the only victim whose body was ever recovered. So it was only found on May 12, 1951, about 6 months later, in an area that had been thoroughly searched after her disappearance. Okay, so again, her body was recovered 6 months later in an area that had been thoroughly searched. And apparently her body was in such a mangled state that no cause of death could be determined. Now, I just want to quickly hark back to the disappearances in the national parks we discussed with you. Again, this is right in line with the work that was done around the cluster of disappearances in the national parks in the United States. Again, the park authorities are not very keen to disclose this information, but especially our listeners in the States, you need to be aware that these clusters exist. Go back to our show when we discussed this, and I will post again the links to the books and so forth. But it took, I think the gentleman put 15 or 20 years of research into it, and encountered a lot of resistance from the Parks Authority when he wanted to, get their data and publish his book. So everything points to something not being quite right. Now, people disappear all the time. That's of course not so surprising. It is a surprise when it happens in clusters, and it's also a surprise when you never ever find a trace of them again, or if you find really strange evidence like folded clothes, or sometimes when they are found again, these people, they seem confused and have no idea what happened to them. In some cases, like I said, not wearing any clothes because they had been left behind. So this is a very strange phenomenon. Finally, we have the Bridgewater Triangle. People do love triangles. It's an area of about 200 square miles in southeastern Massachusetts, which is just south of Boston. And there's a plethora of supernatural phenomena that are occurring here. It has been the area that is, to a number of cryptozoological sightings. So a lot of cryptids are being seen there. There have been several reports since the 1970s of tall, hairy, ape-like creatures roaming the swamp. Again, we are put in mind of Bigfoot, Yeti, Sasquatch, Alma, all those strange hominids that we think don't exist, but you know what? I think they do. And I think they are not quite the creatures that we think they are. I think there's some ability to maybe vibrate between different reality shift, if you will, because it's very, very strange, some of the evidence that we've come across. There's one very strange case, and I don't want to digress too much, but one very strange case of a man in China. And I will dig up the video for you guys as a black and white video that was shot back in, I think, 1920s, 1930s, of this man. He was very, very tall and very oddly shaped, if you will, very strangely shaped skull. And his mother said she had been accosted by a Yeti, by one of those hairy wild men. And if you look at this poor fellow, you can almost believe that she's telling the absolute truth. Because apparently he was not capable of speech. There was nothing wrong with him physically. He was just very, very large. And if you see the video, and I will try to do my best to dig it up again, it's one of the most amazing things I've ever seen. But I digress. There have also been in the Bridgewater Triangle, there have been numerous sightings of thunderbirds. Okay, now these are giant pterodactyl-like creatures that have been seen fighting in midair. In 1976, there was a report of a man who saw a giant, ghostly, red-eyed dog rip the throats out of two of his ponies. Now, this Thunderbird, this is a very, very old kind of story that the Native Americans have as well. These massive birds, and it's known as the bird rock, if you read Sinbad, and there are other stories around the world which talk about these rather large birds, which, of course, we haven't really come across yet, or at least have not any physical evidence for. Now, they're not just cryptids, but again, we have mutilated animals, mostly cows and calves. And again, this time they seem to blame satanic cults, but this is unlikely, and nobody has come forward, and no one even knows where the animals came from. So they may have been taken from somewhere else, and after they were finished with the mutilation, they were simply dumped there. It's also a hotbed of UFO sightings, and that goes back all the way to 1760, when a sphere of fire was reportedly hovering over New England. Not a new phenomenon. Okay, and they weren't called UFOs or flying saucers back then. It was a sphere of fire, because that's what people saw. Okay. Now, there have been, since then, many sightings of unexplained objects in the sky. including a large number of black helicopters. Love black helicopters. One from 1976 describes 2 UFOs landing along Route 44 near the city of Taunton. And another from 1994 recounts a strange triangular object with red and white lights seen by a Bridgewater law enforcement officer. In 1908, on Halloween night, 2 undertakers who were traveling to Bridgewater noticed in the sky what looked like a giant lantern. And apparently they watched it for almost 40 minutes before it disappeared. Again, at different times, UFOs were called different things. Okay, if you read the Bible, you will find descriptions of UFOs in there as well. You find old or medieval art, you will see glowing orbs. You see little people inside glowing orbs in the sky. The Aborigines painted them. Pretty much all ancient and Aboriginal peoples had their own representation of these glowing lights in the sky. So this is not a new phenomenon. Okay, and we should not be confused by the fact that we now call them flying saucers, which is a term that was, I think, coined in the 1940s or 50s, because that's what it looked like to the people at the time. Make no mistake, these are cultural artifacts, and people will always try to describe what they see in terms that they know. Okay, and we would do the same thing today. We call them flying saucers out of habit, or UFOs, and again, a UFO, it's simply an unidentified flying object. Unidentified flying object, that's all it says. It doesn't say anything about its shape, its origin. All we're saying, it's unidentified. So we don't necessarily always equate UFO with alien or extraterrestrial. It doesn't have to be. Dave and I hold that it could very well be inner Earth dwellers, interdimensional travelers, secret government craft, and a vast variety of other things, including time travelers, and who knows what. All we know is that we don't know what we're looking at. We haven't identified these flying objects, and the same goes for the unidentified submerged objects, which exist aplenty as well, specifically around the Atlantic areas. There's some in the Mediterranean, but people do see them quite often and traveling very, very fast. I mean, much faster than our submarines could travel. Okay, and I think what's very important, they're talking about triangles. Now, triangles have become very popular sighting, I guess, objects as of late. We see a lot more triangles than we have in the past, which is very strange. And I've seen some very, very good footage on YouTube and other documentaries as well, on TV and so forth. Myself, I have not seen one, I have to say. I think Dave has had, of course, many, many, many close encounters. In fact, many than anybody would want in their lifetime. But he's not here, but next time he can share some of his experiences again to remind you guys that he is certainly very aware and intimately familiar with the subject, and it's affecting his life profoundly. But again, it's his story to tell. Now, that brings me to the end of this particular list. I found it fascinating. That's why I wanted to share it with you. There are more mysterious places in the world, and I know this was heavily America-centric. I will endeavor to find a more international list for you to enjoy next time. But I do want to remind you as well that going forward, Dave and I are going to put together a show cycle around fiat currency and fractional reserve lending. And the reason we have decided to do that is because I think most people don't understand exactly why we live in the world we do, and why the Amish can just go out and build a house with their friends, and why we can't, and why we have become so used to this way of life that we've simply accepted it. This is reality. Well, no, it's not. It is only reality because we have accepted it as reality. We have accepted that fiat currency and fractional reserve lending are in fact something that we want to live with. If you really understand what fiat currency is about and how fractional reserve lending works, you would not be for it. Okay, I'm not either. And it's fascinating to see the genesis of our system, because again, it's not always been like this. Okay, it has not. This is a relatively recent phenomenon. It's a relatively recent development. When I say recent, a few hundred years that we've lived in this kind of economic system, where we accept a piece of plastic, for the most part, or a piece of paper in some cases, not so many anymore, as having any intrinsic value. If you look at a dollar bill, it's a piece of paper. It's not, it's printed more or less prettily, but you have now agreed with everybody else that you can purchase something with this piece of paper. It's actually a phenomenal concept if you think about it, because we have now allowed for people to become parasites. Parasites. Because you no longer have to be useful to society to survive. Because we have money. Okay? Now in the olden days, people lived in tribes, families, smaller communities and so forth. And for the most part, people had to be useful. Okay? Because if you weren't, then there would really be no place for you in the tribe. So everybody did their fair share of work. Hunting, gathering, looking after the children, planting crops, cleaning, stitching stuff together, being the spiritual leader like a shaman or whatever. All these were real jobs, more or less, right? Today, the vast majority of the people that are making big bucks, I mean a lot of money, do not have any use at all to anyone. None. Zero. There's no use for politicians. There's no use for bankers or lawyers, all right, or bureaucrats or anyone like that, unless we live in a society like ours. If we lived in a subsistence society, in a society where you actually have to, earn your keep, if you will, you would have to do something useful. None of these guys do anything useful. In fact, watch the movie Wolf of Wall Street. It's fascinating. In the beginning sequence, Leonardo DiCaprio is talking to Christian Bale, and Christian Bale is a bit of a mentor, and he says, it's nothing. We're not doing anything. We're not building anything. None of this is real. It's imaginary. And Leonardo says, oh, no, but we're trying to make money for our clients. No. You're trying to make money for yourself as a trader. You don't make money for your clients. You make sure that the clients keep their money in the market. And they will, because they're greedy. You, on the other hand, get paid commission on every transaction that the clients undertake. And that's the truth of it. That is the truth. That's how the money market works. Now, these are guys that bundling up pensions and companies and shares and stocks and sell them and resell them and, bet against them. And it's a huge gamble. It's the world's biggest casino. Okay? That's what the money market is, or the share market. I don't care what you call it. In fact, I urge you all to read up on the tulip crisis in Holland. And I believe it was this in the 17th century, so 300-400 years ago. Read up on it. It will illustrate the insanity. In fact, I'll tell you about it next week or the week after. It will illustrate the insanity of stock market, of shares, of future speculations, of short selling. Betting that something will actually go down in value. And this brings us to 9/11, where a lot of people bet against these airlines that were involved in the hijackings before they were hijacked. All right? So they bet huge amounts of money on it and short selling, right? And then, of course, there was a massive payout once 9/11 happened. So again, premeditated knowledge, insider trading. All of these things are parasitic in nature. These people add no value. They don't make anything. They don't produce anything. They don't paint. They don't build houses. They just consume. They make money off your back. They make money off us, people that actually have jobs, right? And in fact, we look down on people now that are tradesmen. That's crazy. If we didn't have engineers and bridge builders and masons and laborers and farmers and garbage men, okay, and sewage workers, society would fall apart. You know what would happen if we took away the bankers? We'd all be better off. Okay? That's what would happen. But people that actually do something meaningful are looked down upon. That's the kind of crazy society we live in today. That's the insanity we've all bought into. And that's why Dave and I want to talk about the fiat money as well as the fractional reserve lending, which is really the foundation of our society. These are the two single or connected things that make our society work the way it does. Okay? There's not much else in there that, if you took, in fact, fiat money and fractional reserve lending away, our society would look very, very different.